So, about Dennistoun Community Council, DCC, you've all got a flyer on your seat, so I won't go into too much detail. We aim to ascertain, coordinate and express the views of our community. We're all volunteers and DCC is not a party political organisation. We'd love to see you at our public meetings, which are held on the second Tuesday of every month, most months. The next one is on May the 13th, 7 to 9 p.m. in St Andrew's East Church Hall, which is on Alexandra Parade. We can also look at our website for any details of further future upcoming meetings. Okay, so the reason we're having this meeting, Whitehill Pool is a much valued and relied upon leisure facility in Dennistoun, and it's been on the agenda at, I would say, every single meeting of Dennistoun Community Council for the last 6 years, ever since we held that meeting back in 2019, which was in response to proposed cuts to Glasgow Life amenities. Things have moved on a bit since 2019 for various reasons. At the time that the original Safe Whitehill Pool campaign was launched, also included in that were the Alexandra Park golf course and the Hag Hill gym, both of which we no longer have, which I think by my reckoning means that the pool, which is closed, and the library are the only amenities that we have in Dennistoun, which are run by Glasgow Life. We're delighted to have 5 people here from Glasgow Life tonight. I'd be lying if I'd said that we haven't had our difficulties in communicating with Glasgow Life over the years. But hopefully, with so many of them here tonight, we'll be able to get some answers or at least information. Now, you should see the agenda is projected behind me. So if it's okay with you, I'm going to ask you to be patient because there's going to be about up to 40 minutes of people making statements and giving information about the pool, including local elected members and also Glasgow Life. After that, we have an hour of input from the public. So I would just ask you to be patient, and I will make sure within that hour you get everybody, or as many people as possible, get a chance to have their say. We will have, providing we run on time, 20 minutes left at the end to decide next steps. Some people may want to get involved with if the decision is taken to revive Save Whitehill Pool campaign. You're not obliged to stay for that if you don't necessarily want to get involved in the future steps. If we overrun because so many people want to have their say, then, I mean, maybe the next steps will just be to get names and emails and see who would be interested in having another meeting. There are some forms for you to leave an email address up at the back, and even a Dennistoun Community Council pen can be yours if you need it. Okay, and the last thing I want to say before we go on to the story so far is I think it's important to bear in mind that this meeting is specifically about Whitehill Pool. I know Councillor Casey has mentioned in his statement about talking about the wider Whitehill campus, which includes the school, but this meeting is specifically about the future of the pool. If you could just bear that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is the story so far. I'm just going to say a few words and then I'm going to hand over to Bill Stark. So Dennistoun Community Council made that video in November last year to mark, with some sadness, the complete closure of Whitehill Pool for a year, which closed in, I think, December the 3rd or 4th, 2023. This was obviously just due to RAC, and I'm only going to say this once, which is reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete. I'll just call it RAC from now on. Also at the time that we made the video, a palisade fence with a lockable gate, which you will have heard referred to in the video, had just been installed at the side of the pool. potentially blocking access to a common footpath shortcut. I'm not sure if it's a right of way or not, down to the drives, to the local primary schools, down to Duke Street. This was quite alarming, I think, to everybody in the community, because the minute you put up something like that, which is not a very welcoming fence, it's a bit more like you'd see in an industrial estate, it implies the building is closed off, it's going to be neglected, it's on the route to dereliction. So people did feel quite strongly about that. The barrier, I should say, and Glasgow Life told us that it costs £4,000 to put up, plus labour costs. It hasn't been locked since it's been up, but it is still an unwelcome sight round our community facilities, I'm sure you'd agree. And also particularly galling, given that Glasgow will be hosting the Commonwealth Games next year. And obviously swimming and para-swimming are going to be one of the main sports that are going to be featured. So obviously Tollcross is going to be very much in focus. And, you know, I think we all feel it's a shame that after the Commonwealth Games were held in 2024, and we hope that there would be a legacy of, you know, people being able to live healthy, active lifestyles in the East End has kind of faded a little bit. But there'll be lots more about that later on. Now, I'm going to hand over to Bill Stark, who's going to give you a bit more detail about the Whitehill Pool campaign. So, Bill.
Okay, folks, good to see you all here tonight. Very happy to see a lot of people from the campaign that started back in 2019. Also very happy to see a lot of new faces who have come into the area probably since that time. I was given a job to produce a brief of the campaign from the last 6 years, and I wrote several pages, but you're quite lucky because I've gone back in again and I'm going to save a lot of pain, and I'm going to bring you just down to a few of the main highlights of the last 6 years. Back in December 2018, Glasgow Times published a list of 12 venues under consideration of closure by Glasgow Life. Whitehill was included on that list. In January 2019, Dennistoun Community Council hosted a public meeting down at the Dennistoun Library. And many people from that night are here tonight as well, so that's good. A follow-up meeting was held at the Whitehill School Theatre, and that was, as I mentioned earlier on, it was packed to the rafters, so another big crowd for that event. There was many meetings on both public and private meetings between Glasgow Life and Millland Backhouse Association and Grant Murray Architects, who were involved in doing a survey of the building to compare our findings with the Glasgow Life summary of the state of play. Our feasibility study actually met very closely with the Glasgow Life findings, so that was good. That's a bit of comfort in there. At the end of all these discussions, there were 3 options for consideration towards the end of the campaign activity at that point. Option 1 was for relatively minor investment with a view to keeping the pool open for a few years, involving essential maintenance and some upgrades at a cost of £5 million, which was the figure that was quoted back in 2019 regarding the backlog of essential maintenance required by the pool, for the pool. Second option was for greater investment involving major upgrades to keep the pool open for around 10 years. That was going to cost a sum of about £10 million. The third option was for major investment with a view to building a new pool, and that was going to cost £25 million. Now bear in mind this was a long time ago, and these figures do not relate to where we are today. At the end of all this, we went for option 1, which is the only realistic, affordable option. Again, to keep the pool open, and what was underway to carry these recommendations forward. Unfortunately, on February of 2020, what was brought to a halt. The pool closed in 2020. The pool opened again in March of 2021. Through that time, between 22 and 23, work was done in the pool. Investigation and subsequent repairs for the teaching pool were in hand. Upgrading of the changing room areas, upgrading of reception area, upgrading of lighting and installation of LED lighting, mainly in the small pool area, and other items were going on as well. And things were looking up, and we're looking like making good progress. Then the pool closed suddenly in December 2023 with discovery of wrack, as we mentioned earlier on. So right now, the cost of these initial options and the feasibility of each has changed dramatically. With the discovery of wrack throughout the area, we need to revisit basically the whole thing from scratch again. But looking back, the campaign stopped the plans initially where the pool was under consideration for closure. We kept the pool open, and hopefully after tonight and the coming weeks and months, the pool will return to use in some manner. That's all for now, thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill, for that summing up of where we are now. So I'm now going to go over to the people that we invited to give a statement tonight. First of all, we have 4 representatives from Glasgow Life. So Glasgow Life is an arm's length organisation with charitable status, which runs Glasgow's sporting and cultural facilities, but is financed by Glasgow City Council. Oh, right, sorry, we have 3 people from Glasgow Life and 1 from Glasgow City Council. So from Glasgow Life, we have Alan Milner, who's the head of sport, Scott Faichney, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, check first, who's special projects manager, and we have Andrew Olney, who's director of libraries, sport and communities. And we also have David McEwen, who's the divisional director, property, city deal and major projects for Glasgow City Council. So I believe Andrew Olney is going to say a few words first. So if you just want, wherever you're happy standing.
Right, thanks very much, Val. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, thanks, Val, for doing the explanation as well as sort of the connection between Glasgow Life and the City Council. As Val explained, we operate the cultural and leisure venues on behalf of the City Council. So Whitehill Pool is City Council owned. We have a lease for it, and we would be operating it if we were able to at the moment. I've been asked to give a very brief outline of where we are at the moment. So we now have a series of costed options that allows, if you like, if funding was secured, to be able to reopen the pool. And in very much the way that Bill explained, it is looking at, I suppose, an options from being able to mitigate against the wrack within the building, so keep the wrack and do things around it that allows the pool to reopen, right the way through to significant refurbishment and looking at those kind of options. So those options consider the presence of the wrack within the building, but I must sort of stress and add in that there were, as Bill explained, significant other issues that existed prior to the pool closed in December 2023. And we need to look at those and recognise that those significant parts of the structure and the services in the building are at the end of life and also of severe risk of failure. So to be able to open the pool, it's not just about addressing the wrack. We need to be able to address elements of the pool building too. Therefore, the costs are significant to deliver a long-term solution. And I think there's initial sums that have been talked about of above £5 million as being the cheapest option. And I should stress that that is based on not being able to go in and do detailed assessments within the pool, because like everyone else, we can't spend time in the pool because of the health and safety issues. So that is based on, I suppose, consultants, professional consultants, cost estimations based on, I suppose, today's building costs without any detailed assessments. So we have to recognise the costs are significant to deliver a solution, and a long-term solution. Bill talks about 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And so if we're to secure the pool in the community for a long period of time, the costs are significant. Currently, there's no provision in the council, in the capital budget for the pool. And at the moment, and I recognise what Val said, we're not here to talk about the school tonight, but we have to realise that it also has RAC present. So the City Council is having to develop options regarding the, if you like, how to address the RAC within the school. Our next steps, and we have been working closely with the City Council property team, which is why David's here tonight, is to be able to develop a much more detailed options appraisal that links, I suppose, the pool and the school, that gives the council the opportunity in terms of recommendations and decisions about the way forward. In this process, over the next few months, we really want to be able to engage with the stakeholders involved, so particularly Bill, the Whitehill Pool campaign, and also keep the Community Council closely up to date with what we're doing and the work that's going on. Our aim is to have something in place in terms of options appraisal that allows us to be talking and briefing the elected members of the council after the summer recess. So we're probably talking about August this year. Finally, I just want to confirm one or two things, I suppose, just to make it clear for everyone here present. Firstly, Glasgow Life has no ability, mandate or permission to close any of the building it operates. Okay, we cannot make that decision. Secondly, neither can City Council officers. Decisions around the long-term future and any permanent closure of a pool will be with the City Council elected members at committee level. Given that, Glasgow Life will be continuing to work closely with the officers in the City Council to be able to identify a solution. But we have to recognise that solution is not going to be a simple one, and it's not going to be a cheap one either. And therefore, to be able to deliver that, we have to work with the council in order to be able to secure the significant funding required in order for the pool to reopen. I'm going to close at that. I know there'll be lots of questions. I think it's probably better that we move on and move into that. So, thank you.
Thanks for that, Andrew. I believe David McEwen was going to speak. No, is right. So that.
Because we said it's about the pool rather than school.
Okay, well, if at any point, input, right, okay. Now, I know there will be lots of questions from that. What I'm going to do is, because we have time to do this, and as I say, DCC has had some difficulties in communicating with Glasgow Life in the past. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand the mic over to Frank, who's the chair of DCC, just for a response to what you've heard. Frank, thanks.
Thank you very much, Val. The response is very short. No, I had my starring role in the video there as sputtering fat guy in December, and the quote then was that costs are significant and the Glasgow Life are looking into things. Here we are, 4 months later, we're being told costs are significant, Glasgow Life are looking into things. By August, there may be something. You know well, Andrew, that I've complained about the communication with Glasgow Life being along the lines of blood from a stone. And the result of that has been the sacrificial lamb of David McCready coming along to Community Council meetings every month to be able to tell us absolutely nothing, because Glasgow Life is looking into things. What we heard through David was that it was an important council financing meeting in February, and there would be a report back to Glasgow Life, who would look into things in March. And the result of that is you're going to look into things further. Doesn't impress me at all. I wouldn't think it's going to impress anyone here either.
Okay, thank you, Frank. And as I say, once we've been through all the statements, everybody will have their chance to respond as well. Okay, so I'm going to move on to our elected representatives. So just to explain who we invited. So we invited all the elected members who specifically cover Dennistoun, and I'm talking Ward 22. So that was Councillor Alan Casey, who is here, Councillor Anthony Carroll, who is here. Councillor Elaine McDougall is unwell and sent her apologies. We also invited the MSP for the area, who is Ivan McKee, who's here. The MP for the area, Maureen Burke, who sent her apologies. And we invited all the MSPs responsible for the regional MSPs with responsibility for Glasgow. Now, I have a statement that was going to be read out by Elaine McDougall from Paul Sweeney, who can't be here. He's a Glasgow MSP as he's driving an ambulance to Ukraine. So what I'm going to do is I'll let everybody else that's here speak first. Then I'll read that. I know we have John Mason, MSP, here as well, and I believe we may have Patrick Harvey somewhere. If it's okay with you guys, I'm happy to take contributions from the floor when I open it up. But I think we get through this, and then really people have to have their say. Okay, so if Alan Casey would like to come and present his statement, thank you very much.
Thanks, Valerie. And it's not a statement as such. I think this is a constructive meeting, and hopefully I can put a case forward, I suppose, in terms of how we move forward with proposals for Whitehill Pool. I first of all wanted to kind of start just by saying that I fully support the campaign, and I will continue to do so. There may very well be differences of views and opinions in terms of how we move forward, in terms of what happens next. But you still have my support no matter what way in which the campaign moves forward in that sense. But that will take away in terms of what I'm going to be doing as an elected member to try and progress plans and proposals in a different way. The reason for that is because I suppose over the last 5-6 years, this kind of stick and plaster approach that we've been seeing and doing has not really got us anywhere. It's not really worked. We've had some investment in the facility over those years. And Andrew rightly said that any final decision on a permanent closure, or indeed what happens next, will sit with elected members, whether that be at the council or within the board of Glasgow Life. And that's something that is absolutely true. It's fair to say that there has been no democratic decision at any point through this campaign to close Whitehill Pool. The only democratic decisions that have thus far been made was to invest an additional £1 million capital into the building, and Bill had spoke a wee bit about some of that work that was underway, where the changing rooms had been upgraded and there was some lighting upgrades before COVID kind of took in front of that as well. And the other democratic decision that was made was when we came out of COVID, where we put into the budget additional funding to increase the opening hours, because the opening hours were obviously constrained, and it was the only pool in the city actually that got increased opening hours in that budget, because we knew and valued the facility itself and we knew how much it was being used. But obviously RAC then got in front of that and closed the pool for health and safety reasons. So, albeit I take on board Valerie's point about the kind of, this is specific to the pool, but I think the context around about the whole campus is important in terms of the case that I think I'll hopefully be making to the council for investment for the facility. And that's because there is RAC also in the school building and indeed in the pool building itself. And for me, albeit there is mitigations in place in the school, the long-term future of the school will continue to have to be requiring ongoing maintenance that will come at a cost to the council year on year to make sure it continues to be safe. The pool and indeed the school are nearing the sort of kind of end of their operational life in terms of what they were projected to last for. For me, I think it's becoming economically unviable to sink in a significant amount of money into buildings that are coming to at the end of their kind of natural life. And that's why I've taken the view that I think we should be focusing our campaign efforts on a full rebuild of both the school and indeed the pool. Now, for me, that gives us other opportunities in terms of the kind of wider estate. We also have an ASN school at Park Hill, which is in a similar state of kind of repair. It's kind of nearing the end of its life and could be doing with upgrades. I think it gives us vast opportunities to actually create a state-of-the-art campus on the grounds of Whitehill to last for years and years to come. And that's the case that I think I'm hopefully making. In terms of the kind of cost, just to replace and fix the school roof is around about circa £6 million. The cost to replace the school roof is about £19 million. We heard for Bill earlier, the other cost to fix the pool and bring them up to standard at 5 years ago's prices was around about £20 million. All in, you're talking 46 odd million pounds just to get buildings at their end of life back to a state of repair that would be deemed acceptable. For me, that's not far away from the cost that you'd be looking at in terms of building a brand new school and a brand new pool. And that's why I think we should be focusing our efforts in terms of doing that and not that kind of stick and plaster approach of just repairing and getting us through the next 5 years, 10 years or even 15 years. We need a facility that is going to last and benefit the community of Whitehill, community of Dennistoun, for decades to come, many years to come. And that's the case that I'm going to be making. So that is my view, very much my view. Now, there's a couple of things in that. My preference to that would be absolutely that facility has to be where the current facility is. If that was not possible, it would have to be very close to it, and the council will need to look at options along those lines and see how that would be possible. There is no capacity in the system to decant pupils from that school on a temporary basis until a school's built. So it would have to be built in conjunction with the school still operating, and that's very clear. So we'd have to find a way of doing that, and as I say, that's the kind of case that I'll be making. So that's my position on it just now. I've campaigned alongside the group. I chaired a working group that had all of the campaign groups. I had the community council, I had the swimming clubs in it, to try and get that investment. Thus far, no political group on the council has been able to get that wider significant investment. For me, we need to be all working together now to build a proper business case to get that investment for the longer term for the pool, and that's my position on it. And I'd be more than happy to speak to any local resident about my ideas and how we actually progress that. The only downside to this proposal, and it's not going to be a popular one, is this is not going to be fixed in August. This is not going to be a short-term solution. For me, I don't see how we get that pool opened in the short term, given the costs associated with it. This is very much a longer-term plan, as I say, to put us in the right place to have a facility that's state-of-the-art and can serve the community of Dennistoun for the next 50 to 100 years, for instance. So that's where I'm at, and I've been more than happy to answer any questions later on. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to ask Councillor Anthony Carroll to make a statement, or you want to call it.
Thanks, Melody. I'm short enough, and so if I'm sitting down, I think folk at the back might not see me, so I'll maybe stand just to speak to you. Thanks all for turning out tonight, and it's great seeing so many people here. I want to kind of flesh out some of the points made by Glasgow Life about the time scale of what's been happening as well, because I don't think that really has been touched upon about what the updates have been. So for the first one, for example, for me was the 21st of February when I wrote to them about it, to get the second update about what has been affected, to be clear about what's been affected in the pool, public access areas, the gym, dance studio, back of the house area. There's a lot of it that has been affected to give that picture of what has got back in it. So we then had to wait to get an update during March when they were doing these kind of surveys on that, and that was on the 25th of May. It then took to get that update about what they've been developing about the costs from the consultants on what options to do, and there were two options there about retention of the repair work or kind of keeping the rack in the building, or to fully strip out the rack. So they were working on that in May. It then took over the summer holidays until the 16th of August, when we were hearing about basically a holding pattern. This is when the holding pattern that I think Frank was mentioning kind of started in particular, about the costings, as that's when we were hearing in the next coming weeks that we would be shared these costings of how much it would cost to deal with the rack. Cut to September, the same message was given about in the next few weeks, you'll be given the costings about how much it will do with the rack. One thing as well that I do want to mention was basically this meeting that was held. It's the Capital Programme Board with officers in the council. They were then given a report there in February, just around budget time, about how much it would cost for things. And notably within that letter that they sent detailing that on the 17th of December, it said it will also detail the other major repair and refurbs work required. To me, I thought that would include the costings already of how much it would cost to be able to do a whole refurb, partial refurb, or just deal with the rack to get it to where it was in December 2023. The rough costings then, when I met with Andrew and others within Glasgow Life and the council, approximately, like Alan said, about 5-6 million just to deal with the rack, about 18 million to deal with the rack and make the pool go to December 2023 standards, or for the whole refurb, about 35 million minimum to be able to do that. To give details of what this health and safety issues are as well practically. So the pipes and all that is under the pool itself. They need to kind of rip out the pool to be able to get in. So just to give that kind of image of what that work would mean for it. And that kind of points to what the next kind of steps are for me at least. And something Andrew said there about, it's elected members' decisions to permanently close or not. I can say as an elected member, I would not be voting ever to permanently close that pool. One thing I want to then point to is what we do next, and it was mentioned in the video, where do we get funding for? Because that's the key next step. Whether we are going to refurb the whole building, and that's what at a minimum we deserve, to have a full working pool permanently in Dennistoun, not be in the same place we've been 5 years, 10 years down the line, have a permanent pool so we don't need to keep having these meetings every so often. That's one option. Or to rebuild. I'm wary maybe about this whole campus idea, because I think the cost is about 19 million for the roof of the rack. Cost for rebuilding a whole school campus I think will be substantially higher than what a potential cost to rebuild just say the pool and redevelop the pitch as well, because that's also lying to reckoning ground that I think we should be looking at as well within this. That's the two options I think we might have, and regardless of which one we'll hear from folk tonight, and from the reignition that I hope we do have with the campaign group going forward, we need to be fighting tooth and nail for capital funding from our governments, UK government and Scottish government, about this right now. I'm glad that there's MSPs in the room, so it's good to see even John and Patrick here, because that's, I hope, who you'll be pressuring as well, and if she'd hear Maureen Burke as well. And to talk of that particular example I mentioned in the video, one aspect that I think we should be in the short term dealing with, so it can deal with some of the school issues, is about the RAC funding that the UK government gave for schools. It was about £500 million for English schools. There was no consequentials that were passed on because of some academy status issues that they keep there down in England. I don't know why. We also shouldn't be pushing for that funding to be extended to be UK-wide, dealing with leisure facilities as well, because they are just as key as schools, as hospitals, for people's health. So I think that's one aspect that we should be trying to push for in terms of that UK funding that we're still missing out from. And I didn't get a response when I raised that in November with the MP when I met her about that. I'm still waiting in my inbox an email back. I think many are actually in this room. And so the next step is to try and fight for that funding, and that's what I think we should all be doing next. And on that note, I'll just leave that there. But thank you all for coming again, and I look forward to the campaign. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Farrell. So I'd now like to ask Ivan McKee, MSP, for, I think we're still Provan, aren't we, before we change, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Still Provan until the elections next year. Thanks very much for inviting me along tonight, and thanks very much, most importantly, to all of you for turning out to this meeting. And like Councillor Casey and others, I was very much involved back in 2019 with the original campaign to save Whitehill Pool. And I'll come back and reflect on that when we talk about next steps, because I think it's important to learn from what have been successful campaigns and other campaigns I've worked on in the constituency, be it Lightburn Hospital or other campaigns we've taken forward to save facilities, to learn what works and frankly what doesn't. But in terms of the situation as it stands at the moment, clearly a whole series of events have been hugely disappointing with after we campaigned in 2019 and secured funding to keep and the decision to keep the pool open. Obviously the closure because of COVID and then the discovery of the RAC has been a real challenge. I think the work that Councillor Casey's put into this has been very, very helpful because it maps out that long-term solution. And if we look through what's required to get from where we are to a solution that people are going to be happy with, and as Billy Carroll said, not been back here on a regular basis, trying to patch up the state of the pool, it's about finding that long-term sustainable solution. And when you look at the numbers, that investment that's required to keep the thing operating just now compared to what you would need to rebuild the thing, I think it absolutely makes sense to be looking at that longer term solution. And other comments on that I think are that at the end of the day, this is about finding the funding from somewhere, and Billy Carroll's absolutely right. We need to be looking at all the options there. We need to continue to have those conversations with the UK government, through the Scottish government, and that's already happening. To put pressure on them to release some of that funding to come north of the border, and also through our elected MPs, who unfortunately aren't here tonight, but the elected MP to be able to take that campaign forward as well. The Scottish Government, you know I'm a Scottish Government Minister. The way this works is when I'm here tonight, I'm representing you. That's my job. I put my government hat to one side to avoid any conflict of interest, and I'll be writing to the Scottish Government to say that they should be stepping up to the plate as well to be able to contribute as part of the broader contribution. Now that's easy to say. The reality is clearly there's RAC right across the country, and there's no funding specifically for RAC. And I don't need to remind you of the current financial situation we're in, only getting worse through global events that really have a direct impact on the funding that the Scottish Government gets through various channels. Notwithstanding that, I'll be making the case that that money should be brought forward through whatever channels and identifying channels for the pool. But the important point is, what's the best chance of success on that? And this comes back to what Councillor Casey's talking about. The best chance of success of that is to latch on to funding pools that are already there. The Scottish Government, working with councils, has got a £2 billion programme to reinvest in schools. The decision on which schools get rebuilt as a consequence of that is coming from the councils who prioritise, and then COSLA across Scotland who prioritise on behalf of all the councils. So I think that avenue, to be honest with you, if you're looking to raise that amount of money, that's the most direct and effective way, because there's already money there that's going to help to do that. So just in conclusion, from my point of view, it's about running that, me supporting you as your elected member to be part of that campaign as I was back in 2019. In terms of what works, it's about doing the legwork, it's about understanding the options, it's about working through what those different scenarios are, and then it's about putting pressure in the right place at the right time to get the right decision makers to make a decision on that. And that's about joining that up, and I think the campaign did that really effectively last time, and it's about replicating that, and I stand ready as I did then to work as hard as I need to on the details of that. As I say, I think there's absolutely options here, but we need to look at that sustainable long-term solution. So I think that's by far the best chance of success to get something that's going to last well into the future. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Alison McKee. Okay, I'm now going to read the statement from Paul Sweeney, and after this, we're going to throw the floor open. Okay? So a statement by Paul Sweeney, MSP. My apologies for being unable to attend the meeting in person this evening, as I'm currently driving in a convoy of ambulances to Ukraine. I send my solidarity and support to the Dennistoun Community Council and Save Whitehill Pool campaign, which I have supported through its various ups and downs since the pool was first threatened with closure in 2019. It is deeply frustrating that despite winning a reprieve for the pool in the council's budget 6 years ago, it has continued to be beset by various existential challenges. First, the repair backlogs, which closed the teaching pool as well as Glasgow Life's self-defeating restrictions on opening hours after the pandemic, which prevented proper use by the public at large, as well as the two local swimming clubs, Whitehill and Temple, the latter, of course, providing swimming opportunities to those with disabilities. I have admired the campaign's tenacious and proactive mission to restore the pool as a vital community amenity, challenging Glasgow Life's rather excessive capital cost estimates for repairs with an independent survey, and I'm glad to see this approach continue despite the shattering blow that the discovery of rat concrete in the structure of the building has had, completely closing the pool for over a year now, sorry. The lack of proactive public communication from Glasgow Life on the continuing state of limbo has been completely unacceptable and frustrating, and there appears to be little sense of urgency in addressing the problem of how to restore the swimming pool for Dennistoun. I hope this meeting can mark a watershed whereby we have much more energy and transparency from Glasgow City Council and Glasgow Life about how it intends to proceed, and that they will work with the Save Whitehill Pool campaign to develop options to restore the public pool at Whitehill. As I'm sure you all agree, we are open-minded about how this might be achieved, whether it is a deep renovation or a defurbishment of the existing structure or a new building altogether. But the key here is to comprehensively and openly assess the feasibility of each option, to work with the community to identify the preferred approach, and to then campaign together to secure the necessary capital budget from all levels of government. With the Commonwealth Games returning to our city next year, this would be an obvious and significant legacy. I am eager to do all I can to work with the Save Whitehill Pool campaign and all my colleagues elected to represent Dennistoun on the Council and in Parliament to restore Whitehill Pool for the community. We have an overwhelming public mandate to do so. I last raised Whitehill Pool in Parliament with Sport Scotland CEO Forbes Dunlop during a session of the Health, Social Care and Sport Committee on Tuesday, March the 11th, 2025. The full exchange in the official reports is as follows. Paul Sweeney. I appreciate the feedback on the planning for the Commonwealth Games. I want to pick up on the point about legacy and in particular the opportunities for developing capital facilities that are not currently being utilised. For example, Whitehill Pool in the city's Dennistoun district, which is close to Tollcross International Swimming Centre, has been closed since December 2023 due to the presence of RAC, which has displaced a number of local clubs, including ones that focus on people with disabilities. Has Sport Scotland engaged with the organising committee for the 2026 Games and the Commonwealth Games Federation about what capital investment opportunities are available to ensure that facilities, in particular in the deprived parts of Glasgow, can be repaired in time for there to be a legacy proposition for the Commonwealth Games? Answer from Forbes Dunlop of Sport Scotland. I have had conversations about Whitehill Pool and its challenges with Glasgow Life, which has done an audit of swimming pools in Glasgow. In the funding model that was agreed with the organising committee and the Commonwealth Games Federation, the capital monies are specifically targeted at the 4 venues that will be used to host and deliver the Games, rather than the wider facility estate. Discussions, negotiations or agreements that focused on the Games venues are concluded, but we are having an ongoing conversation with Glasgow Life on the wider facilities estate. Okay, so you've heard a lot of people say a lot of things there. I am now going to open the floor to questions. We're making good time, so we should be able to get near enough an hour of this. So this is an opportunity for you to have your say. You may have a question or you may just want to make a statement. I'm going to let a few people speak to get the ball rolling. If we find that there's a lot of people wanting specific answers to questions, we will go ahead and ask a question. And I'll ask if the people sitting here on the right wish to respond, but you don't have to ask a question. Okay, there's only one microphone, so if you want to ask a question, you're welcome to stand up probably and ask it, just because it might be hard to hear if you don't stand up. If you want to come down to the front and use the microphone, be my guest. If you choose to just say your question from the floor and it's not necessarily clear, I'll maybe repeat it just for the benefit of filming. And I'm just reminding you that we are filming. Okay, so the only rules are, please keep your comments relevant and respectful. We know there's a lot of strong feeling in the room, but we want everybody to speak one at a time, express their views in a respectful manner. Obviously say what you want to say, but I'm thinking quite a lot of people will want to speak. So as brief as you can be while getting your points across. And I will get through as many of you as time permits. Now, I would actually like to start off by asking a specific group of people if they've got anything to say. One of the things that really struck me, one of the most emotive things in the video, were the voices of the young people who are having to travel to get their swimming lessons, don't have a local facility. You know, it's not great. Do we have any young people now? People's idea of young people may vary, but young people are children who wish to speak. Do we have a taker? Do we have a young person? Hello. Would you like the microphone? You okay? Right. Fire away. You want the microphone? Sorry. If you just, when you're finished, this goes for everybody, if you could hand the microphone back to me, because if you put it down the ground, down on the desk, it'll make a terrible noise. Okay, thank you.
As a young baby, I have grown up in the East End of Glasgow, listening to my nan, mum and all her family and friends talk about how good the East End is and how they used the Whitehill Pool when they were wee. So it is a pleasure to join the Whitehill Swimming Club based at Whitehill Pool. I've been a member at the club since I was 5 years old, and I hope to continue my pathway and become a volunteer or teacher when I'm older. I am 11 now. My wee brother is also a member of the Whitehill Swimming Club. I am here tonight for not only myself, but for the young people in my swimming club and for the Dennistoun community to try and push the ongoing fight to get Whitehill Pool repaired and back open. The closure of Whitehill Pool is not only has made a negative impact on us in the club, but has also been determined to the wider Dennistoun community. Some community use the pool as a form of social interaction, but due to the closure and no other gyms or pools nearby, they've become reclusive, which impacts on mental health. I myself fundraised for a defibrillator for my primary school in St Dennis, and now I am worried that these devices and around Dennistoun may be used more because the local fitness pool has closed, so this impacts on people's fitness to be and added mental health. Please take our pleas back to the council and get things moving in getting Whitehill Pool repaired and opened as soon as possible.
Well, that was what a brilliant way to kick off our public input. Thank you very much for that.
All I want to say is, do you know what? I don't want an all singing, all dancing, wonderful, modern facility. It's really like a bog standard swimming pool, if you don't mind.
It's unacceptable for us to keep coming into community meetings like this, because frankly, these alliances all, and this is the first point I made at the first very meeting regarding saving Whitehill Pool back in 2019. The alliances and the game plan, we know they've got the game plans from day one. So I'm going to ask Alan a couple of things. Rebuild where, right? If it's If it's 6 million to fix a roofer, I'm not writing to you to ask me to recommend a roofer to fix my house in this community, because seriously, that's another lie.
Councillor Casey and the gentleman from Glasgow Life have mentioned that the rack in the school and the swimming pool have to be dealt with together. My question is, I believe that there's a PPP, a private-public partnership, still going on in the school, and the school will be out of the council's hands until 2030. So if you link these two things together, the earliest that any capital programme could mention repairs to the school and the pool together would be after 2030, and that's a hell of a long time to wait for the pool to be operational again.
We do, you know, whatever plan, I think everybody acknowledges we're not going to have a new pool overnight. And one thing that, you know, people, and an anxiety that I have, because I live very close to the pool, is what's going to happen in the interim. Because obviously we've had the precedent set of the fence going up. I don't know if anybody from over this side would like to answer that point about what's going to happen in the interim, because as you say, the contract for maintenance for the school isn't up till 2030, and I know that the pool is maintained by City Building. Is that right? Yeah. So if anybody wants to, you don't have to. Sorry, and the other points as well. Yeah. Sorry.
So there's a couple of things in there. I suppose the main question is, if there is a rebuild, where would the rebuild be? Certainly, my preference would be to be on site. As I say, the campus is much bigger than just where the buildings are on, and I think that's what the council are looking at doing just now, is a kind of feasibility study. Is, can there be built on site while the school and the pool and all that remain? And that's something that will have to be done through a feasibility study. My absolute preference would be on that site. If it can't be done like that, then we would have to look at other options and look at other locations. And Mark mentioned the park, and I'm not going to go into the kind of legal issues. And I don't think that's a discussion for tonight. But I think that's an option that should seriously be looked at. Not necessarily where the golf course is either. There's other parts of the park that have got locations that potentially would be able to be utilised for this park. In terms of the costs, and again, I don't want this to be a debate. I think the costs associated with rack and rack replacement have been costed via kind of benchmarking study of how much it's costing to fix buildings across the country, and I think that's something that's been done as part of the desktop survey. I don't know if there's been any individual quotes from companies, etc., about how that can actually be done, but that's a kind of general benchmarking. In terms of the general cost, Mark, you mentioned the word lie, which is a really strong word, and I think it is a very emotive word. What I would say is, and Bill mentioned it earlier, the general costings that Glasgow Life got before, back in 2019, when the independent study that was done by the community, by the campaign group, it was almost identical what came back. There was variances in it, but the costings were very, very similar. So I would hesitate to use the word that the council are lying about cost, because I think it's been backed up by that independent study. But absolutely, we would verify the cost of anything moving forward. In terms of the PPP element of it, I think that's an important bit of context. Yes, it is under the school currently is under that PPP contract until 2030. The ongoing maintenance of the school is being done by the provider, which is Amy, and that is up until that point in 2030. Then any burden of that would fall at the council's feet effectively on 2030. That for me is why we should be absolutely making the case for a full rebuild just now, build that case so that we can start the work on that before that contract comes to an end. I think we'd have to look at the technicalities of if there was a new school ready and built before that contract in 2030 ended, how you can transfer that over. I think that's doable. I think there's a way in which we can do that. But there is obviously, that's a conversation I think is part of the business case moving forward. In terms of the current maintenance, I mean, my clear view is that we should be looking at a rebuild. When we know if that's something that's going to be done, then clearly that's the answer to what happens with that building currently, in terms of demolition, making space for building that. If there is no possibility of a rebuild, though, that leaves a lot of other questions, and I suppose we need to look at other options about what we do with the ongoing maintenance of it. But I can't speak operationally for Glasgow Life. They might want to come in terms of the kind of general maintenance of the location as well, but hopefully that answers some of the wider points and questions.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else want to say anything? Anthony, do you want to work?
Thanks. Yeah, just on your point, Bill, about the interim, what we do in the interim, I think something we should be doing, Glasgow Life should be doing in the interim, is providing actually transport for swimming clubs, because that thing that you've seen from the video was the issue about people not being able to get to Springburn and help when you try to get the train back, because the westbound station at Alexandra is still closed till May. So there's issues like this that haven't been thought about in terms of the impact when you do close a facility. So I think in the interim, at the very least, I think transport should be provided for the swimming clubs to be able to have that provision available. In terms of what was mentioned about the PPE not being until 2030, it's one of the concerns I have about if I need to know more details about, and hopefully well in August, about what that will look like if we were to take an option about this whole campus sort of project. I have more comfort with if an option was available and knowing the costings of how much a whole rebuild of the pool would do. Because I think, and Glasgow Life can correct me, is it the heating that's been separated from the pool in the school? So there's been the separation from the pool in the school's kind of connected tissue that you have at that wee kind of bit between the two. That makes that option maybe a bit better to do just for the pool, rather than having that whole campus. Although I do appreciate why it's important to look towards that as well. I think because we hear about the pool, that's what I'm thinking about in terms of the pool and, like I said earlier, about the ash pitch, so that, you know, like what I was saying about having more space for like groups who want to do things like men's walking football and things. There is stuff to be looked at, not just about the school, but the pitch as well.
Okay, thank you for that. What I'm going to do now is just get a few more statements from the floor. If there are any questions, we'll maybe just let a few people go, and then, you know, just so that we're not immediately going back to the panel on every question, so you get plenty of time to have your say. So I know some people had their hands up. I think you start there.
Why is the building being neglected for such a long period of time? Life sciences are there for a reason. The life cycle costing should be about in front of you. And your predecessor, I don't know whether you were involved in this, the whole process. It's a disgrace that the building is there in such a state of disrepair. And it's one you guys that has just watched it happen, just sleepwalking into an absolute abyss.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm going to just hand the microphone to Frank, who's going to pick up on that last point.
As part of the research for what might be said tonight, I took a look at repairs to other pools in Glasgow. And Glasgow Life have on every single page for every single pool, as with any pool, scheduled investment is required to deliver a more comfortable environment for swimmers and support the long-term provision of well-maintained leisure centres across the city. And I started to look at other pools, and every single one of them, I stopped after 6, because Bellahouston, Drumchapel, Easterhouse, Gorbal, Scotstoun, Tollcross, every single one of them has had greater investment over the past few years than Whitehill has. And sort of pick up on the point that it's a surprise that it's nearing the end of its life. There has been almost zero maintenance for Whitehill, as far as we can see, zero capital maintenance.
Hello, my name's Astrid. I'm a rather new resident in Dennistoun. Councillor Casey, while the idea of having a brand new spiky facility on the same campus sounds fantastic, obviously, is there any sort of indication as to what sort of timescale this would take place over, what the costings would be compared to the repairs, and indeed what the lifespan of such a facility would be, given that Whitehill was somebody apparently looked at a 30-year lifespan and thought, yep, that's fine.
I just want to reflect that what I heard frequently was about process here, and there's a lack of consultation, a lack of transparency, a lack of communication, and a lack of clarity. What assurance are you going to get that this is not going to continue into the next phase of more working together?
Okay, that might be a point to see if anybody wants to take up on any of these points. Yep, Alan again, do you want to go? Or Alan and Anthony, you can. Yeah, thank you. And maybe Glasgow Life afterwards if anybody's.
Yeah, okay, a couple of things there. I mean, the reason I come up first is because there's specific questions to me, so hopefully that makes sense. The point about the independent study, there was two options. There was one, do all the repairs all at one time, or there was a second option, do it over a period. I think it was maybe 15, 20 years in terms of that wider upgrades. Absolutely. When you looked at doing it over that longer period of time, the cost significantly increased right enough, so you had to balance up those two options, but those options were absolutely there. I think, though, for me, that was done at a time when we were looking at the pool in isolation. For me, I don't know if we can still look at the pool in isolation. I think, as I say, we have to look at that wider campus and how we do that. In terms of lack of investment, that's a point I absolutely agree with. I think I've been on record as saying this, is Whitehill Pool for many, many years has had little to no investment. It's had some investments, but it's had little to no investment when you compare it to other facilities across the city, and I think for me that's totally unacceptable. I didn't come in here with the intention of kind of playing party politics or anything like that. I'm not going to do so, but there is an important point I want to make, is I represent the SNP, we obviously are in power in the council, but we inherited most of these problems when we took over the council in 2017. So that is a fundamental issue, because it had no life cycle kind of maintenance when we took that over back in 2017, and then that led to some of those issues coming up about closures and all of that kind of stuff. We've been dealing with the fallout of that ever since, and that's why we're still here, because there was no kind of life cycle maintenance to say, well, actually, all this coming to the end of its life, where is the investment plan? And by the way, Whitehill Pool was not the only building that we inherited that had that issue. You've got things like the People's Palace, for instance, that is the similar problem. There's facilities all across the city that had lack of investment for many, many years. It's been a huge frustration of mine that you see multiple upgrades of big facilities and big venues that can all sing and all dancing ones, and the community venues have had little to no, and I think for me that's unacceptable. And I've tried to change that certainly since I've been elected, since 2017. In terms of the kind of the question around about the venue itself, if indeed it can't be built there, I think that's absolutely goes with the question about consultation. The council have to be absolutely open and transparent about the options, the feasibility study, if you want to call it that, about what can be done on site, and if it can't be done on site, what can be done elsewhere, and then what happens with the site if that was to be the case. I think that's something that's going to be much further down the line, though. It's not going to be an immediate question. I think we need to understand what can be done there first and foremost, which is important. I even raised a very good point. It's partly the reason why I've been trying to make the case about a rebuild, and it's looking at where funding actually comes from and how you can get funding. As Ivan said earlier, there is funding pots to replace schools and build new schools and new school campuses. And for me, the biggest question has always been, and it goes to the point, whenever the big £21 million number was mentioned, people have shied away from actually tackling the problem and dealing with the solution. For me, that's a funding route that we can look at utilising in terms of where there is already funding, i.e. building new schools, co-locating campuses, building a swimming pool on there. In terms of the kind of costs associated with refurbing and indeed a new build, there is a difference, absolutely. I think, as I said, the very bare minimum in their 2019 costings for refurbishment was looking at £46 million to deal with the school roof and indeed the refurbishment of the pool. That's probably increased a bit since then in terms of inflation and all that kind of stuff. I think the kind of desktop costs of a new secondary school was something in the region of £70 million in terms of kind of desktop costs. So that's an indication of that difference in cost. There would be an element added on, obviously, if you're adding a pool onto that. So it is significant. It's significant capital investment, but I think we've got the kind of the momentum in the room, the momentum behind your elected members here to actually build that case and try and seek and get that funding. Because For me, that's the only way in which we get out of this problem, because I don't see a solution that invests 25 odd million pounds just to get the pool to a situation that was 5 years ago. I don't see how that's financially viable in the current climate, and that's why I want to focus on that kind of neighbourhood.
Okay, thank you. Anthony, did you want to?
Thanks. Just quickly on the question about assurances from Glasgow Life, because I think that's the key issue everyone raises and has been raising for the past 5 years in particular, is what assurances, and hopefully we can get some answers about that from Glasgow Life themselves. But I think for us, as members of the community, as elected members, is about these options happening in August, and who's deciding that, who's been able to input about community feeling about those options, and that sort of steering group having as many community members on board as possible as part of that. I'm sure it will be part of the monthly agenda in terms of Dennistoun Community Council, but having that as a separate entity that can actually have input, similar to what the working group used to be before I was elected in the previous iteration for the campaign. I think we're needing to have that assurance about community reps being involved in that process, about what options is available on the table. What do you think about the options locally? Do people want a rebuild? Do people want a refurb? Do people... Yeah, there's so many options there that we need to have that input, and I know that's what we'll have afterwards in terms of what are our next steps. But it's not just tonight, it's what then officers are then sending out to elected members, what then that working group is going to, or steering group is going to be saying or doing, because it needs those voices on it, and I think that's the assurance we need tonight from Glasgow Life.
Okay, would anybody from Glasgow Life wish to comment on that? Okay, thank you, Andrew.
Okay, there was a number of things there, and I'll try and cover a few of them as quickly as possible. I think the first thing to say is, and I think in terms of what moves forward, I can't change yesterday, but I can change tomorrow, and we can change tomorrow. So yes, I think consultation, engagement, starts from now. The work up to date has been.
Come on. Let's commitment now. Let's go with that.
Okay, it'd be, and so the engagement starts that I wasn't involved in 2019. So that's the first bit. So that's the first thing. So work again with the Save the Whitehill Pool campaign and look to develop what those options are, because what we've been doing so far is looking at, I suppose, building issues. But actually, what we need to start doing now, and that's why we need the support of the campaign, that's about putting into the context of the wider community and what the pool means. And so that's the first step. So that's something I really want, I suppose, stress, is that I suppose there's a commitment there from today onwards that there will be much more engagement. Now we're in a place that we can do that and have some real honest discussions with the community. Second element is, Frank talked about investment in other pools. I've got the list here with the levels of investment across all our pool estate. Whitehill actually sits 7th out of the 12th in terms of investment over the last 4 years. So we have been invested in the pool. What I think Councillor Casey, I think it was Councillor Casey, Councillor Carroll stated is actually the council and the Glasgow Life has significant investment and building life cycle issues right across its estate. So Whitehill Pool is not sitting there out as something that we've forgotten about. It is all part of that, but we have considerable challenges right across the city in order to maintain our estate. The presence of FRAC has just added to that issue and that challenge. And actually, that's a one-off cost that needs to be addressed immediately if we're to get that building reopened. And as I said earlier, there are other things that will need to be done around the pool to be able to do that. So, and that's why we're talking about a cost of around 5 to 6 million, current estimates, to be able to do, I suppose, an ability to open the pool, and it would be in the same condition as it was in December 23, which means the learner teaching pool would not be reopened. That just gets us to a place of where we were in December 23.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to thank you for that, and I'd also like to thank you for your commitment to consultation and engagement, which we have in writing and we have on film. And I think I think it's really important that, you know, we do all work constructively together. One of the reasons for having this meeting was so that people could get things off their chest. And hopefully, tomorrow, as you say, is a new day and that we can actually all work together. Okay, has anybody else got any more comments? Oh, there's a few. I'm going to say you there. That's it.
It's just to do with the Hooters tax that's supposed to be imposed, but I'm just wondering if it's feasible that that could be put back into the community, because I know it's proposed to go back into hospitality and tourism. Would it not make sense to put some of that back into the community?
My name's Josephine, I'm from Whitehill Pool. Now, we have well over 100 children that access the property. In the past, we had more than that again, but we hemorrhaged children because we had to move to Springburn due to this and to COVID. We're now back in a facility where we can use that on a weekly basis, which is great. Can't have as many children as what we had when we were in Whitehill because the pool doesn't facilitate it. Going forward, we've heard in the grapevine that Springburn's going to have to also close because there's various issues up there as well. So I put it to Glasgow Life. Where do we go next? Because we're facilitating well over 100 children and young people on a weekly basis to help them to swim, life-saving skills, and to keep their fitness up. Now, if we don't have that, what do the kids have in the future? Not to mention the fact that when you go to swimming pools, I went to try and swim a few months ago, well, 2 months ago now, and I know the pool's still closed. Easterhouse Pool, couldn't swim there because it's closed because of the big storm, which is fair enough. Take myself to Toll Cross Baths, can't swim because there's swimming clubs on, which is great, but the children don't have anywhere to swim afterwards. They learn to swim at these clubs and at Glasgow Life facilities, but then there's nowhere for them to actually swim. I then went to the Gorgles, where I was managed to swim, but I couldn't swim until after 8 o'clock that particular night. I had to go in and walk about a river rapids before I could actually swim in a proper pool. Now, I appreciate we've got no anywhere else to go other than East End of Glasgow. That's all we have. We're in a situation where we don't have Whitehill anymore. But surely these should be priorities. It shouldn't be a sticking plaster like you said earlier on, because it's not a quick fix for me as a child. Cutting my knee, put a plaster on it, it's fixed within 2 days. This has been going on for a long, long time. Why are we still in this position? But please help us out, because Whitehill Club's not going to survive this next bit if we don't have any answers pretty soon. Because we're worried, and we're worried for our children and young people.
Well, thank you very much for that, and thanks for sharing the real difficulties that this pool closure is causing. I mean, we seem to, well, hopefully we don't forget that learning to swim, swimming can save your life, and kids should be able to swim somewhere that is convenient for them. They shouldn't be having to rely on a train to go to a club that might not be open. Or the money, indeed, yes. And I think that just emphasises how important local facilities are. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to take a few more comments. I think this person was here, and then you up at the back. Sorry, I can't actually see your face.
The decision, the ultimate decision is via Glasgow City Council with regards to the changes or decision with regards to closure. However, Glasgow Life being an arm's length organisation, we cannot change your right. We can't do an election or anything like that. Our legal representatives are here, and they are having difficulty getting information from your organisation. Historically, your organisation, across its whole estate in Glasgow, has lacked investment. Now, I understand you just said you weren't here in 2019, but we were, and the estate was, and your organisation was, and the responsibility was there. So you can't criticize that responsibility as a class of the Glasgow City Council. Your organisation should have been investing within the infrastructure. We've seen the same policy at work in Whitehill when you tried to close the Whitehill Library with the People's Palace here in the Winter Gardens. These public amenities, the treasures of Glasgow, have been underinvested for a long time and are now failing. And it's coming back to bite it. But we don't have any power to remove Glasgow Life. Actually, impact the structures of Glasgow Life other than our local MPs, councillors and such. So I would say everyone, push your legal representatives, push your councillors to act in your interests.
That's a really good point. I mean, you're all here because you care about the pool. We've got more time for some discussion and then we will move on to next steps. There was somebody, yes, you up at the back there.
Great having everyone here today. I think it's brilliant having, the whole group of people in the room, so thank you. First, a question for Alan, right? Obviously, New World Solution is something that you're pushing quite hard. What is the timing of that? And what is the interim solution before that comes into place? Can we get a commitment from everyone sitting here that you will genuinely work with us on an interim solution and on a final solution for the pool? And I want all of you to sit there and give us an answer as to whether you will actually do that or not.
Right, I'm going to take one more comment.
The idea of having to wait for the new school, the school, there's no specification, never mind design, it doesn't have a location. It's going to be 10 years. It's going to be 10 years. We're going to have to wait for people to get. I know Alan comes with good intent, fair play. But honestly, God, we cannot allow this thing to be hived off into, we've got to wait for this school. Quite apart from anything else, it lets Glasgow Life totally off the hook, to your point earlier. And then you just, it's nothing to do with us. We just have to wait for a new school. It's not good enough. We need the pool. And if it costs whatever it costs to get rid of the rack out of the pool without returning the pool, let's at least do that. Let's at least.
Okay. Right, so sort of two quite specific points there. One is about timescale, and I think we'd all kind of like to, and what happens in the interim. And also, we have had a commitment from Glasgow Life that the consultation and engagement starts afresh today. Okay, who from the panel would like to address any of those comments?
Yeah, so we will commit to doing, as I said, we are developing, we will work through the options. There's a whole vast array of options, as I said, as the gentleman at the back said, just getting the pool open. And that sort of price range we talked about is £5 to £6 million, all the way through to a complete rebuild of everything. There's a number of options there. The crucial element to it is Glasgow Life doesn't want to be standing here saying the pool's closed. We want to be running a pool, but the gap is the funding, and the gap is the capital funding. And the capital funding comes from the City Council and is allocated through their budget process, and Glasgow Life gets a chunk of that. Okay, the chunk we get is very small at the moment because the council's capital programme, because of public finances, is very small across the piece. It was decided, I suppose, and allocated at the February budget meeting, and it is not significant right across everything from schools, Glasgow Life things. So we will continue to work with that. We would love to have a solution overnight, but we will continue to work and do our best. I said, we have no mandate to close the building, so our solution is to try and work to find a way to get that open. Is it an interim solution? Well, that will be, again, a decision of the council because they will allocate that capital monies and they have to be sure that they're getting value for money.
We have representatives from the council here, so who's taking the action on the capital fund? Who out of this group is going to take that action?
Excuse me, before you say that, an evaluation on the feature.
No, sorry, Mark.
No, just the feature.
Mark, I want to do that first.
I'm okay buying from the NHS for a hydrotherapy fuel as well. I'm talking about because there's not going to pay as a week, that's how
So thanks for that question. My name is David McHugh, I'm the Divisional Director for Property within Glasgow City Council, and I work very closely with colleagues in Glasgow Life. So I will lend my weight to the commitment that Andrew's already made, that we will continue to look at the long-term solution for what we want to do at the pool. As officers, all we can do is present facts and figures. So I've got a team of people who are working with colleagues in Glasgow Life, looking at the feasibility, detailed feasibility options around all of the various different options, the costs, the advantages and disadvantages, effectively creating a mini business case for each of those. We will then present those to the committee, the appropriate committee of the council, who will make the decision as to what is affordable within our financial planning and what is not. Officers don't make decisions about what finance is made available to us. We only can say, if you want to do this, it's going to cost that. If you want to do that, it's going to cost this. It's up to the council, in its wider sense, through the budget process, as Andrew mentioned, for the council to make the commitment to actually finding that money. But there's also other comments this evening about we will look everywhere and anywhere. We'll have our hand down the side of the couch looking for money here about what funding might be available to support all of the various different options. So that is our commitment as officers, but we can't commit to the provision of the funding. That's out with our bailiwick, unfortunately.
No, thank you. I appreciate that, and that's helpful. So two things. So the budget process and recollection is February. So does that mean we need to wait until February? And the second one is, what are the timelines that your committee is doing on putting those business cases and evidence cases back?
Okay. So after this.
Yeah, so we've made a commitment to our elected colleagues that by the end of recess, we will have a report that is robust enough to detail the various different options. So by August, we will have a report outlining probably between 4 and 6 options that we might want to choose. And then there will be a dialogue about what ones represent the best value to the council. Clearly, as has been outlined this evening by some of our other speakers, as custodians of the public purse, we have got an obligation to provide best value. So I get the point that was made by the gentleman at the back there about, can we not just get it opened? But clearly, there's another group of people who would quite rightly criticise officers and elected members of the council for spending £6 million and being no further forward than we were 5 years ago. So I think we need to be mindful of that, and as officers, what we will do is we'll present what we perceive to be the best value. Alan talks in the long term, absolutely, but clearly the passion in the room tells us that there's a short-term problem as well. So we need to balance those two things together, and together we will work about finding a long-term solution and what the interim arrangements might be to smooth the passage to the long-term solution. But short-term pain might lead to long-term gain, or we decide not to do that. But I think we won't be able to have a more detailed analysis of that until around about August, when we've got the provision of the report that talks through all the options, the advantages, the disadvantages, the merits, the demerits, and then we'll be able to have a real adult conversation about how do we do this.
Okay, and so yeah, if I could ask you to be quite brief, because we're on Alan yet, so just really brief, and then I'm going to...
Thanks. Yeah, just touching on the point about, that capital spend and how we actually allocate that. That's an important issue because, yeah, like we were saying, the budget was set in February there, and that was where some of the allocation for capital spend was put. It touches on the point that was mentioned by the tourist tax, actually. So the example there, Edinburgh, for example, they'll get 4 times as much from the tourist levy as we would. They get about 50 million from it. We would get maybe 12.5 at a 5% rate. I think that rate should be high. But they capitalised some of the revenue that they took from that. So it was 5 million they took for housing capital. So you can increase the revenue to get more capital funding through that. It is an option, but it's a very small, narrow window to get if we're having 12.5 million for all expenditure of that tax. There could be potential, and I think that's something to put in to people's responses to the consultation, which is still live about the visitor levy now. If that is an option people do want, to say, why can't we capitalise some of this revenue for public leisure facilities such as swimming pools, libraries, etc. So that is maybe an option I think people could fill in within that consultation. But it is through budget processes in February that we start that capitalisation process, but it's identifying capital funding nationally as well from Scottish Government and what measures they will do to increase the capital budget there too for their capital programme. So that can be through pressuring them now in terms of what measures we'll be doing in terms of taxation to increase that capital investment on a national level so that we can then get that. And like I was saying by the UK Government, if they have projects that are affecting things like schools, why are we not getting the funding for that here when they're doing that in England? So there's things like that that we can pressure them out and before February to get that funding from capital as well kind of committed to.
Right, I'm going to hand over to Alan now because I want to still get some more contributions from people.
I'll just be very brief because it was a very specific question from Alan, and I suppose you were looking for a commitment about us actually doing something, and I absolutely, totally agree. And I would continue to do so. I have been working, as I say, with the campaign group, as you know, I worked really closely when you were involved quite heavily building the case. I've got a track record of doing so, working together with the campaign group. I managed to get £1 million put into the council's budget 4 years ago, I think it was. Now, so as I say, the track record of actually building a case, getting investment, that was capital funding. This is on a different scale completely, obviously. I'm not under any illusions that that's the case. I also secured revenue funding, as I said, to open the pool longer hours by building that case, working with the campaign group, and that's what I'll continue to do. The issue in terms of the timescales, I think, is an important one. I'm not going to sit here and lie to folk. I'm not going to sit here and try and make up answers here, because I don't have an answer to that. What I need to see is I need to see the report that comes back from the officers in August, which will give me an indication, and hopefully that gives a bit of detail about what the timescales are likely associated with some of those options. And I hope that answers the other question as well about an interim solution. I can't say and commit to an interim solution when I've not seen the options that are presented in front of me. I think it would be unfair to do so, but I absolutely commit to sitting in the room with the campaign group and everybody who wants to speak about it. Again, I'm happy to actually reset up that campaign group in terms of the wider working group to sit with officers actually go through some of these options as well, so that we can start building that case, whether that be short term, long term. Like I say, this long term vision that I've got might not be the right one, and I'm happy to admit when I'm wrong. If that's the case, then I'm happy to look at other options, but we need to look at all the facts that are available in front of us, and hopefully that's an effective for you, Alan, in terms of what I'm going to do in the future.
Okay, sorry, right, I'm going to have to, we are running short time, so I'm going to get Ivan McKee to respond to that. There's a few hands up here, but really, yeah, I'll do as much as I can. We may not have much time left for the planning bit, and I'll sort of prioritise people who haven't had a chance to speak, but yeah, Ivan, if you could.
Yeah, just very briefly, in response to Alvin's point, yeah, absolutely. And you've seen the last time we went through this process, the commitment and the time I put into that, sitting down with the campaign group, with other people that were involved in this, a number of meetings and small groups just to go through the detail of that and doing that separately as well. So absolute commitment to work on the detail with the group. We'll see what the next steps are tonight. But whatever group is taking that forward, I'm very happy to have an early meeting and go through it. And to be honest, a lot of ideas coming out tonight, and I think there'll be more of that coming out of the group. A lot of avenues we can explore, and I'm absolutely delighted to work with the group to explore all of those and put as much pressure on where we can to move this forward.
Those and boundaries and managed to secure. Where did that get us? And did it all go to the centre? Because Bill mentioned we get a new changing, a wee bit of changing upgrade and some new lights. That's not all been bound. What happened to the rest of it?
It's still there. It's still written against Whitehill Pool, so it's still there.
Okay, and there's one woman that's had her hand up for a while over here. Is that, yes? You? Yeah.
Just very briefly, I'm a member of the Whitehill School Parents Council, and I think there's a lot of other members of Whitehill Parents Councils around here, and so just by having what they see, if you're putting together a case and taking evidence from interested parties, that I think the Parents Councils would be very keen to feed in and have a view. It's incredibly unique in the city, the way that this campus is laid out, and it needs to be taken into account. That there's a nursery on site, there's a primary school on site, and there's a high school on site. And so that makes it a really unique perspective and needs for the community.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to ask, I can see John Mason, but I can't see Patrick Harvey. Would somebody, would either of you like to come up and make a comment briefly? Okay, thank you. And then we'll have John Mason after that.
Thanks very much. I won't speak for long because I was mostly here to listen. I didn't realise I was going to be asked to speak. The thing I found really disappointing and actually upsetting about watching the video was we saw that picture of the public meeting at the school. Was that 6 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago? And already then there was a lot of anger about people not being kept informed, not knowing what was going on. And it now seems, from those video clips filmed just a few months ago, that people still feel that way, that they're not being told what's going on. And we've heard some commitments, and I take those seriously, and I welcome the commitments to keep people informed. But I think that this should be the really easy bit. I think probably everybody gets that dealing with a building with RAC is complicated, finding the money is going to be a challenge, but keeping people informed should be the easy bit in all of this. And when a community comes together because it feels so strongly about something, that's an asset every bit as much as the building. And when you don't keep people informed, that's neglecting another asset that's really, really valuable. So I think the least that should come out of tonight's meeting is a formal agreement between Glasgow Life, the City Council, the Community Council and the other local campaigners about how people are going to be kept informed routinely all the time about the state of the building, what the options are and how the decisions are made, so that it doesn't take meetings like this to get people along and start answering questions. Do it routinely. And I hope that's something that can be taken in good spirit from everybody who's here.
Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to John Mason now.
Thanks very much. Yes, like Patrick, I wasn't really planning to say very much. Just for those that don't know, Dennistoun's split between two MSPs. So I cover Reedvale, the smaller part. Ivan covers everything north of Duke Street. I mean, a couple of points that weren't maybe touched on so much. Somebody mentioned, the Commonwealth Games legacy, but I mean, this time round, the Commonwealth Games is going to be very low budget. So I doubt there's going to be really much legacy at all. Last time we got all the housing at the Games Village, but that's not going to be happening this time. My gut feeling is that I like Alan Casey's point that really, what's the point of putting a lot more money into a building that is pretty tired, to say the least. And I do like the idea of a new building, but that is going to be a very expensive option. And I mean, one of my jobs is to be in the Finance Committee in Parliament. And I'm afraid that if we got money, as Anthony suggested, from England, that's not ring-fenced. So that then is out there for everybody to compete. And I can assure you that some of my colleagues want the A9 dualled. Both the Council and the Scottish Parliament has declared a housing emergency, so housing is pretty well at the top of the list if any money comes. But I think there are some positives. And I mean, one thing that's coming up in the next few months, Ivan probably knows more about it than I do, is that Scottish Parliament, well, Westminster is going to give us a plan for the next few years, because a lot of the time we've just been living hand to mouth year by year, and it's been difficult to make decisions. I think that's come up tonight. So there's going to be, Westminster's meant to be giving us a longer term plan. That will allow the Scottish Parliament to give a longer term plan about finances, and that will hopefully allow the Council to kind of plan ahead and know how much money they have. So I certainly want to be very supportive, although Ivan is the main MSP for this project.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are running out of time a little. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over to Bill to talk about a little bit about the sort of next stages of the campaign. I know we said we'd have 20 minutes for next steps. It's not looking like that, but we can do a simple next step, which may be to call another meeting. And I think it's important for everybody to have their say. So I'm going to hand over to Bill to chat a little bit, and then Frank, just to kind of sum up what he thinks of tonight on behalf of Dennistoun Community Council. Okay, Bill?
Okay, folks, we're nearly finished, but not quite. Thanks, first of all, to the community and the local swimming club, and everybody here tonight. Thanks for showing up. Brilliant. Thanks to the guys in the corner here from Glasgow City Council, from Glasgow Life and elected members. Again, thanks for showing up tonight, listening to us, and we're going to talk a lot more in the future. Campaign 2019 has gone. Campaign 2025 is just going to begin. It's going to begin, first of all, by everybody in this room tonight contacting Community Council and leaving your names, your contact details, etc., because we need a large group to back the campaign. We need a smaller group to become a working group for the campaign, because we need a small working group to work with these guys here who could hopefully help us find a way forward. So anybody here tonight who would like to become part of the working group, let us know, let community council know, they let me know. So we need two levels, one, a big wide group, and secondly, a small focus group. I'd like to hear from everybody else an interest in both of these. So we're not finished tonight, we're only starting. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bill. Yes, I mean, I think we can just look around the room and hear what everybody's been saying, and we know that there's this genuine drive and passion within the community to keep our pool going in some form or another, whether that is refurbished or rebuilt. Okay, just to sort of close up, and obviously the next steps thing is now please do leave your address on the sheets of paper that are going round if you want to be contacted, or you can contact us through the website directly. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Frank, who's just going to kind of say a few words on what he's thought of tonight. Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, I suppose. What I think we've been asking for commitments from Glasgow Life and the council all night. I think the first commitment we should make is that sometime in the next month or so, Dennistoun Community Council will hire this hall again. We will publicise another meeting, a community-only meeting, to decide on what the community wants to do going forward. Talking about the groups that Bill wants to see formed, and we can bring all that together. We'll make an announcement about that sometime, but we'd hope in the next month, and that will be out with the usual community council meetings. I don't think any of us were under any illusions that there was no overnight fix, and that has been underlined tonight. There are I think a lot of us feel there's historical injustices compared with other pools regarding Whitehill, but for the time being, let's draw a line under that and try to go forward. Patrick made a very important point, and we've heard from Andrew, we have a commitment to far better communication in future. And I'd sort of like to drill down into that. We're very pleased to see David come along to all our community council meetings, not least because he's a lovely bloke, but we would like him to have information. We don't want him to sit there and say, well, it's as was. And so that will be the case going forward, will it? Okay. Okay, yeah, written reports, yeah, fantastic. I'd also like a commitment again, drilling down, that in consulting with the community in the future, I would want a commitment that also applies to installations such as that fence. I appreciate there are items that may need arranged at short notice due to health issues, but when it's going to be something like that fence, can I have a commitment that the community will be consulted before it's put up in future? Okay, thanks for that. And the other thing, you've already said August is a deadline. Our expectation would be that there will be cohesive suggestions and alternatives for where we go forward, what the options on the table are, and that will be ready in August. Okay, that's great as well then. The final thing is the point that was made by a couple of people here. Funding buses for organised swimming groups to other pools doesn't seem to take up a vast amount of budget, even though Glasgow Life is short. What do you say to that? Okay. Is that talking to the swimming club and see what we can do? Is that fine by you? Good. Okay, and the other important thing I think we want is that things don't drift on. We are given definite timescales. It's not, oh, well, this will go on in the future. I appreciate August is a benchmark. That's fine, but in future, it's not we intend to do this. We intend to do this by. Can we have a commitment to that as well?
So I think what we can commit to is what officers can commit to, so we will commit to having a report by August. But then the democratic process takes over about the funding. We're not in control of that.
I accept that, yes.
We will set clear deadlines for what the officers can do to support the activity in relation to Whitehill Pool.
Okay, yeah, that's good enough for me. Thank you very much. Okay, I think this has been a relatively successful meeting. I think we've got some solid commitments for the future. We've been informed on what's going on, and anyone that is interested, you will be able to find out via our webpage or our social media when we're going to have the next meeting for the community only. Thank you very much for coming along tonight, and I hope everyone's happy with what's gone on.
That's it, yes. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who's come along, and I'd really like to thank all the people sitting on this side who came along as well, because, yeah, thank you. Thanks especially to you, and look forward to campaign 25. Thank you, good night.